Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I exposed my friend's lie that she was sick to get out of a commitment. It started on a Friday afternoon when my group of friends and I were supposed to meet for something we'd been planning for weeks, a volunteer event at a local shelter. We had signed up together months in advance, and it was one of those things that required commitment. Our names were on the schedule, and the shelter staff were counting on us to show up. Everyone seemed genuinely on board, except for one person, my friend Lila. On Thursday night, she sent a long message in the group chat, filled with dramatic detail. She claimed she had come down with the flu headache, fever, body aches, the works. She wrote about how she could barely stand and how she was so heartbroken to miss the event because she had been looking forward to it all month. At first, everyone sympathized. People responded with heart emojis, feel better soon, messages, and even offers to drop off soup or medicine. But I noticed something strange. Just a few hours earlier, I had seen her Instagram story. She was out at a rooftop bar with some of her coworkers, smiling with a cocktail in hand, looking completely fine. The story had disappeared by the time I went back to check, but I knew what I saw. The more I thought about it, the more it irritated me. This wasn't the first time Lila had pulled something like this. She had a history of dramatic excuses whenever she didn't feel like doing something. She would exaggerate, spin a story, and everyone would end up comforting her instead of questioning her. It was like she had turned lying into an art form. The thing was, this time, it wasn't just some casual hangout she was bailing on. It was a commitment to help people who actually needed us. And the shelter was already short-staffed. We couldn't afford for one of us to just disappear at the last minute. That night, I debated whether to say something. I kept asking myself if it was worth the drama. But the longer I sat with it, the more it gnawed at me. I didn't want to watch her get away with another fake illness, especially when it meant other people had to pick up her slack. By the time morning came, I had made up my mind. I was going to call her out, but I wasn't prepared for how messy things would get once I did. The morning of the event, I messaged Lila privately instead of putting her on blast in the group chat. I figured maybe if I gave her the chance to come clean, she'd admit she wasn't actually sick. I typed carefully, trying to sound more concerned than accusatory. Hey, I just wanted to check in. I saw your story last night. Were you out? Just wondering because you said you were sick this morning. Are you sure you're okay? She didn't respond for nearly an hour. Then, finally, I got a reply. Oh yeah, I was out last night for a bit, but I started feeling terrible when I got home. Trust me, I wouldn't lie about being sick. I can barely function right now. Something about the way she wrote that made my skin crawl. It was so rehearsed, like she had a ready-made excuse for everything. I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. I debated leaving it alone, but instead, I pushed back. Lila, come on. You looked completely fine last night. We need you today at the shelter. If you just don't want to go, you could have said that instead of pretending you're too sick. Her response was almost immediate this time. Wow, are you seriously accusing me of lying? Do you even hear yourself right now? I'm literally in bed, sweating, with chills, and you're calling me a liar. That's really cruel. My heart started pounding. It was like trying to argue with a wall no matter what I said. She twisted it around so she was the victim. Finally, I sent, Lila, this isn't just about you. We signed up for this together, and they're counting on us. If you didn't want to go, fine. But don't put it on being sick when you're not. I saw you last night. You're not fooling me. That message ended the conversation. She left me on read, no response. When I got to the shelter, the rest of our friends were already there. The mood was cheerful at first, everyone chatting while we got instructions from the staff. But I couldn't focus. The whole time, I kept thinking about how Lila had just slipped away from her responsibility and worse, how everyone else seemed to believe her story. At one point, someone even said, poor Lila, she was so excited about this. It sucks she's really sick right now. I wanted to scream. That was when I made my decision. If she wasn't going to admit it, I would show everyone the truth. The only question was how. That evening, after a long day at the shelter, I got home exhausted but still buzzing with anger. It wasn't just that Lila had skipped out. It was that she let the rest of us believe she was bedridden while she was actually fine. I sat down with my phone, scrolling through her stories again, almost obsessively. The videos were still there. Lila laughing with a drink in her hand, surrounded by people, clearly having a great time. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. In one of the clips, Her friend tagged her in a group photo. When I clicked through, I saw the timestamp, 2:04 a.m. That was literally hours before she sent the message claiming she was barely functioning. The hypocrisy burned in me. It wasn't just lying to me privately, it was lying to everyone who trusted her. And I had the receipts. I screenshotted everything, the video, the tag, the timestamp, and our conversation. I didn't send it right away, though. My finger hovered over the group chat icon for at least 10 minutes, my mind racing. Should I expose her? Would I look like the bad guy for calling her out? Finally, I decided to test the waters. In the group chat, I typed, "Crazy how much work we got done today. Wish Lila had been there. It's a shame she was too sick." The replies poured in quickly. "Yeah, poor thing. She would have loved it. Hope she feels better soon." That was my moment. Without overthinking, I dropped the screenshots. No explanation, no commentary, just the raw evidence. The chat went silent. No one said anything for a full 5 minutes. Then, finally, one of our friends, Tasha, replied, "Wait, is this from last night?" I answered, "Yep." She said she was in bed sick this morning, but she was out until at least 2 a.m. Another long silence, then came the replies, "Wow, are you kidding me? That's really messed up." And then Lila herself popped up in the chat. "Are you serious right now? You're sharing my private messages with everyone? That's such a violation. I cannot believe you'd stoop this low just to make me look bad." The group exploded with mixed reactions. Some people defended me, saying she was the one who lied. Others hesitated, saying maybe she really did feel sick after she got home. But I wasn't backing down. "Lila, you lied to all of us. You didn't want to come, so you made up being sick. That's not fair to anyone." Her response was sharp, almost venomous. "You're just jealous because people actually like me, and you had to make me look bad to feel better about yourself. Congrats, you got your little drama moment." And with that, she left the group chat. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. I had exposed her, but now the fallout had begun. The group chat stayed eerily quiet after Lila stormed out. A few of our friends messaged separately, asking me why I did it, but most just seemed stunned. I tried to convince myself that I had done the right thing, that it wasn't about petty revenge, it was about honesty. Still, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling in my chest. The next morning, I walked into the shelter feeling tense. Normally, Saturdays were our busiest days, with everyone bustling around, but the air was thick with awkwardness. Tasha barely made eye contact with me, and 2 other volunteers whispered to each other before heading off to the kennels. At lunch, my friend Marcus pulled me aside. "Look, I get why you were upset," he said, "but did you have to blast her like that in the chat? It kind of made you look harsh." I frowned. "So it's fine for her to lie, but it's not fine for me to show the truth?" Marcus sighed. "It's not that simple. People don't like drama. They just wanted her to admit it quietly, not be exposed like that." I knew he was right in a way. People preferred harmony, even if it meant ignoring someone's bad behavior. But I couldn't help feeling like I was being painted as the villain while Lila, who had lied and ditched us, got to play the victim. That night, my phone buzzed with a notification. Lila had posted a long, emotional story on Instagram. It was basically a rant about fake friends who betray trust and spread private conversations to tear others down. She didn't mention me by name, but everyone knew who she was talking about. The comments were full of sympathy. "You don't deserve that. Some people just love drama. Stay strong, queen." I clenched my jaw, scrolling through. No one was calling her out. No one mentioned the fact that she had lied to us in the first place. Somehow she had twisted the narrative into her being the wounded party, and me being the cruel friend who had exposed her out of spite. I wanted to scream. The following day, I went to grab coffee with Tasha, hoping to clear the air. But instead of backing me up, she said, "Honestly, maybe you should have just let it go. Lila messes up sometimes, but we all do." Now things feel fractured. Her words stung. I realized that while I thought people would side with the truth, most of them cared more about avoiding conflict. And conflict was exactly what I had created. As the week went on, the distance between me and the group grew. People stopped inviting me to hangouts. Inside jokes flew over my head. I wasn't excluded outright, but I could feel myself slipping to the edges. Meanwhile, Lila bounced back effortlessly, posting pictures with friends, smiling like nothing had happened. It made me wonder, had I really exposed her? Or had I just exposed myself? The tension built until it was impossible to ignore. By the end of the week, I felt like a ghost haunting the group. Conversations would stop when I walked into the room, or people would switch to talking about neutral topics like movies or the weather. Every laugh felt like it might be at my expense. I told myself I didn't care, that I had my integrity, and that was more important than popularity. But the truth was, I did care. I hated the idea of being cast as the jealous, vindictive friend who couldn't just let things slide. When Sunday rolled around, the group had plans to meet at a diner after our volunteer shift. I wasn't sure if I should even go, but part of me wanted to face it head on. If they were going to label me the villain, I at least wanted to defend myself. Sure enough, as soon as we sat down, the elephant in the room became impossible to ignore. Lila, of course, was the one to break the silence. "So," she said, swirling her straw in her soda with fake nonchalance, "are we going to pretend nothing happened? Or is someone going to explain why I was humiliated in front of everyone last week?" I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. "You lied, Lila. We were all working hard at the shelter and you ditched us. Then you pretended to be sick. That's not fair." She shot me a glare sharp enough to cut glass. "It's not your job to expose me, though. You could have just talked to me privately. Instead, you made me look like some horrible person in front of everyone." I tried to hold my ground. "You did that to yourself." "Wow," she said, throwing her hands up. "See? This is exactly what I mean. You don't care about me, you just care about being right." The table fell silent. Everyone's eyes flicked between us like they were watching a tennis match. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat. "Okay, maybe both of you could have handled it better. Lila shouldn't have lied, and maybe..." He looked at me. "You didn't have to call her out in front of everyone." It was such a diplomatic answer that it made me want to scream. Why was no one willing to admit that the problem started with her lie? Why was the focus on how I had reacted? Lila smirked slightly, like she knew she had won that round. "Exactly. I just wanted some space, and instead I got betrayed. Honestly, I don't even know if I can trust this group anymore." I clenched my fists under the table. The injustice of it was suffocating. But as I looked around, I saw the tired faces of my friends, all silently begging for peace. They didn't want the truth. They wanted quiet. And in that moment, I realized that standing up for what was right wasn't going to make me the hero. Not here, not with them. After that diner showdown, things shifted in a way I couldn't quite put into words. It wasn't explosive. No one shouted or stormed out. But something fundamental cracked. The next few days, group chats I used to be part of went oddly quiet. Plans were made without me. Photos popped up on Instagram of get-togethers I hadn't even known about. At first, I thought maybe it was coincidence. People get busy. But when I scrolled and saw Lila front and center in every picture, smiling with her arm around Marcus or posing with Sophie, it hit me. I wasn't being forgotten, I was being excluded. I tried to brush it off. I focused more on work, took longer walks, even started reading more. But every time my phone buzzed with a notification, I felt that sting of wondering. Is it them? Are they talking without me again? And most of the time, the answer was yes. The worst part was the silence. No one confronted me directly. No one told me I'd crossed a line. Instead, they just drifted away. Except it didn't feel like drifting. It felt intentional, like I had been quietly voted out of the group without a chance to plead my case. One evening, I decided to reach out to Sophie, who I thought might still be on my side. I texted her, "Hey, can we talk? I feel like things are weird, and I don't want to lose our friendship over this." She didn't answer right away. Hours passed. Finally, just before midnight, she replied, "I don't want drama. Maybe some space would be good right now." That short message hit harder than any argument could have. Space. From someone I'd considered one of my closest friends? I sat on my bed staring at the screen, realizing how easily I'd been cast as the villain. Meanwhile, Lila leaned into her role as the victim. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that she'd been telling people she was bullied and betrayed, that I had some vendetta against her. It was surreal, like watching someone rewrite history in real time, and everyone else just nodding along. I felt trapped between two choices: fight harder to prove I was right, or step back and accept that maybe this group wasn't really mine anymore. But both options left me with the same sour taste, because underneath the anger, there was something else I hadn't wanted to admit. A kind of sadness, a grief even, for the friendships I thought were stronger than this. For the realization that sometimes people don't want the truth. They want comfort, even if it comes wrapped in a lie. And the question that kept me awake at night was, if they were so quick to abandon me, had they ever really been my friends in the first place? The silence and exclusion weighed on me for days, until finally, I snapped. I was tired of feeling like the villain in someone else's story, especially when all I had done was tell the truth. So, I decided to push back. It started with a long message to the group chat. I typed and retyped it half a dozen times before hitting send. It wasn't an apology, because I didn't feel sorry for exposing Lila's lie, but it also wasn't a rant. I kept it measured, factual. I know things have been tense since the fundraiser. I want to be clear, I didn't call out Lila to be cruel. I did it because I value honesty, and I don't think lying to friends is okay. If anyone thinks that makes me a bad friend, that's their choice. But I'd rather lose people than pretend something false is true. When I hit send, my heart raced. I waited for the typing bubbles to appear. Nothing. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still nothing. The next morning, the chat was buzzing again, but not with responses to me. They just continued as though my message didn't exist. Plans for brunch, talk about a new movie, casual memes, all flowing as if I'd been erased. It was infuriating. They weren't just ignoring me. They were deliberately freezing me out. So I shifted strategies. If they wanted to act like I didn't matter, fine, I'd make sure other people knew the truth. I began talking more openly with mutuals outside the tight circle. I'd bring up the story casually, how Lila had lied about being sick, how I'd caught her at the mall, how she'd turned everyone against me when I called her out. And to my surprise, some of them didn't immediately side with her. A couple even admitted they'd heard other rumors about her stretching the truth before. Word spread. Slowly, whispers started to turn. It wasn't a full redemption arc. Most of the core group still sided with Lila, but cracks began to show. One person quietly texted me, "Honestly, I think you were right. I just didn't want to get dragged into the drama." Another said, "Lila does exaggerate sometimes." Don't beat yourself up. It wasn't much, but it was something. Proof I wasn't crazy. Proof that truth still mattered to someone. But the pushback didn't go unnoticed. One afternoon, Marcus called me out of the blue. His tone was sharp, almost scolding. "Why are you dragging Lila's name through the mud? This is exactly the kind of drama we don't need." I fired back, "I'm not dragging her name. I'm telling people what actually happened. If she can lie to the group, why should I protect her reputation?" He sighed, frustrated. "Because friendships aren't courtrooms. Sometimes you just let things slide. You don't always have to expose every flaw." That stuck with me. Maybe he was right, maybe I had been too rigid. But then again, wasn't that the kind of thinking that let lies slide until they snowballed? I hung up feeling torn. On one hand, I could see how my insistence on truth came off as harsh. On the other, compromising my values for the sake of keeping the peace felt like betraying myself. The pushback had given me small wins, but it also left me lonelier than ever. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to decide. Was saving these friendships worth sacrificing who I was? A few weeks passed, and for the most part, the group still treated me like I was radioactive. But then something unexpected happened. Lila started to slip up. It began small. Another friend, Cassie, mentioned offhand that Lila had told her she was working late one night, but someone else swore they'd seen her at a bar across town. At first, it seemed like nothing, just a little inconsistency, but it was enough to plant doubt. Then came the bigger lie. She told the group she couldn't attend Marcus's birthday dinner because she had a family emergency. But the next day, Photos surfaced on social media of her out at a concert, smiling wide, clearly having the time of her life. It was undeniable. And suddenly, the same people who'd iced me out for embarrassing her started whispering behind her back. I didn't even have to say anything. The truth was exposing itself this time. Marcus, who had been her most vocal defender, was the first to snap. He called her out in the chat, blunt and angry. So the family emergency was just tickets to a show? Do you know how crappy it was that you skipped my birthday for that? The chat went quiet for a moment, and then others piled in, some cautiously, others less so. Words like selfish, dishonest, and unreliable started popping up. For the first time, the group wasn't protecting her. And me? I sat there watching the chaos unfold, torn between vindication and bitterness. On one hand, it felt good to see the cracks forming, proof that I hadn't been the problem. On the other, I couldn't shake the sting of hypocrisy. They had crucified me for calling her out, but now they were doing the exact same thing. Later that night, I got a private message from Cassie. You were right about her. I guess we just didn't want to believe it back then. Sorry for not backing you up. It wasn't the grand apology I sometimes fantasized about, but it was something. Acknowledgement? Validation. Still, Lila didn't go down without a fight. She doubled down, accusing everyone of ganging up on her, spinning new stories to cover the old ones. She claimed she'd only gone to the concert to clear her head after the emergency. She cried in voice notes, playing the victim, insisting she'd been misunderstood. And the wild part? Some people bought it. Even after being caught red-handed, she still managed to twist the narrative, painting herself as the one under attack. Watching it all unfold, I realized something important. Truth alone wasn't enough to change people's minds. They clung to the version of events that was easiest, most comfortable, least disruptive. And sometimes, even when lies cracked wide open, people preferred patching them up instead of dealing with the fallout. But there was one thing I was sure of now. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't wrong. The group dynamic might never be the same, but Lila's perfect mask had finally begun to shatter. And for the first time in months, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could come out of this with my head held high. After the concert fiasco, things in our friend group shifted dramatically. The blind loyalty Lila had once commanded began to fracture. People who had always defended her started keeping their distance. The group chat, once buzzing with jokes and plans, grew quieter, conversations more fragmented. Smaller clusters formed, and for the first time, Lila wasn't always at the center of them. It wasn't a complete reversal. Some still clung to her side, unwilling to accept that they'd been deceived. But the dynamic was different now. The aura of untouchability she had wrapped herself in was gone. When she spoke, people didn't automatically take her word as gospel anymore. They questioned, hesitated, sometimes outright ignored her, and she hated it. One night, I got a long, rambling message from her. She accused me of orchestrating everything, of turning people against her. She claimed that, ever since I embarrassed her with the sick lie, I'd been on a vendetta to ruin her reputation. It was almost laughable me. The one who had been ostracized for months, suddenly recast as some sort of mastermind pulling strings from the shadows. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was unraveling on her own. But even with Lila exposed, things weren't simple for me. Some people apologized for not believing me, but others just avoided the subject entirely, as if pretending none of it had happened. The group never outright welcomed me back in. I wasn't excluded anymore, but I wasn't fully included either. It was like living in a half space, tolerated, acknowledged, but never quite trusted again. And I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit before. Maybe I didn't want back in. The constant drama, the manipulation, the subtle hierarchies. It was exhausting. For months, I had been desperate to prove myself, to regain my place, to show them I wasn't the villain. But now, watching them scramble as Lila's web of lies collapsed, I saw them for what they were. People who wanted comfort over truth, who chose convenience over loyalty. Cassie was the exception. She reached out more often, checking in, sometimes even apologizing again for how she'd handled things. Slowly, a friendship started forming outside the group, separate from the noise. For the first time, I felt like I had something solid real, rather than the illusion of belonging. Meanwhile, Lila grew more erratic. She picked fights over nothing, accused Marcus of abandoning her, spread new rumors about people in the group. Some of her oldest allies finally broke away, tired of the constant drama. But others still hovered near, afraid of her wrath, clinging to the idea that maybe she could go back to the way she was before. And me? I stayed quiet, watching it all burn. I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove myself. The truth had a way of clawing to the surface, no matter how much dirt someone tried to bury it under. For the first time since this whole mess began, I felt like I was finally free. But there was still one last conversation looming, the one I'd been avoiding, with Lila herself. Because as much as I didn't owe her anything, I knew she wouldn't stop until she got some kind of confrontation. And deep down, I wasn't sure if I was ready for what that would bring. It happened on a gray Sunday afternoon, the kind where the sky feels like it's pressing down on everything. I had just finished grocery shopping when I saw her, Lila, waiting outside my apartment building. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. My stomach twisted, but I knew this moment had been inevitable. "You've been ignoring me," she said flatly as I approached. "I've been busy," I replied, not stopping until I reached the door. She stepped in front of me, blocking my way. "Don't play games with me," she snapped. "You wanted this. You wanted everyone to hate me." I laughed, not mockingly, but because the accusation was so absurd it was almost funny. "No, Lila, you did that yourself." Her face twisted with frustration. "You think you're better than me now? Because you embarrassed me? Because people don't worship me the same way anymore?" "I don't think I'm better," I said carefully. "I just think I'm done. Done being lied about, done being blamed for things I didn't do, done letting you control how everyone sees me. If people don't trust you anymore, that's not my fault. It's yours." For a moment, I thought she might actually hit me. Her fists clenched, her shoulders trembling with rage. But then, just as quickly, the anger melted into something else, something almost pitiful. Her voice cracked when she said, "You ruined everything." I shook my head. "No, Lila, you ruined it. I just stopped letting you drag me down with you." She stared at me, eyes flashing with something I couldn't quite read, hatred, fear, maybe even desperation. Then she turned on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath. I watched her disappear down the street, my chest tight but strangely light. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. In the weeks that followed, the group fractured completely. Some drifted closer to me and Cassie. Others clung to Lila until even they couldn't take the chaos anymore. Eventually, she faded into the background, no longer the center of gravity she once was. I heard whispers about her trying to reinvent herself with new circles, but I didn't pay attention. It wasn't my problem anymore. As for me, I found a different kind of peace. Smaller gatherings, quieter friendships, people who didn't make me question my worth every second. I realized that being left out of a toxic group wasn't a loss, it was freedom. Looking back, I don't regret exposing her lie. Yes, it cost me my place in the group. Yes, it made me the villain for a while. But the truth has a way of surviving, even when people try to bury it under layers of convenience and comfort. And in the end, it set me free. Sometimes I wonder if Lila ever reflects on what happened, if she sees the trail of burned bridges behind her, and thinks about how it all could have been different. But even if she does, it's not my responsibility anymore. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe, and that, more than anything, is worth all the drama it took to get here.